Well, yes, I think it's not just the internet, but the prevalence of mobile phones that have cameras in them, and increasingly video cameras in them, and increasingly cameras that have internet access. So we've seen a few events like the London tube bombing, where the first photograph that the world saw was taken with a camera phone. We saw when the airplane landed in the Hudson River that the first photographs that were seen by the world's news media was taken by someone with their telephone, and they sent it to Twitter. So more and more, you can be sure that there will be people on the scene of newsworthy events who will capture that, probably with video, and probably send it directly to the internet. So we now have many citizen reporters who are able to provide reports directly from the scene of events. I think I would distinguish between a citizen reporter and a journalist, a citizen or a professional, in the sense that just capturing a video is not all there is to journalism. So I think what good journalists do is to verify reports, try to check the accuracy of the information that they receive, and to find multiple points of view and people to speak for those points of view, and to create a context that enables people to understand the events, and to ultimately create a narrative, tell a story, a true story, that helps make sense of events for people. So whether those are citizens that do that, or whether they're professionals that do that, I think we're going to need to see more partnerships between these people who provide more reports and journalists who know how to do this kind of professional process that I described.
So journalists have now more opportunities to gain information, to recover what people are thinking about an issue.
Well, journalists have always had networks of people they turn to find out about events. They know people who they trust to have an expert opinion on different topics. But now the size of the networks that are available to journalists is much, much larger. And managing those large networks is something that journalists increasingly need to do, that journalism is no longer just kind of a lone reporter or even a small team, but there's more of a community effort. So I think that we either need to train citizens to do what journalists do, or we need for journalists to manage these larger networks of citizen reporters. Well, CNN is a brand, and a brand represents a certain kind of relationship of trust. So people know quality of a product of any kind by its brand, and particularly with news. How do you trust a report? Well, if it says CNN on it, then I think people give it a certain amount of trust. So CNN needs to be careful about who uses its brand. But I think it's entirely possible that many more people could qualify to be part of a network for a CNN or any other news agency. And it's really up to the news agency to develop some criteria or some test that would qualify people. But I think we could have much larger networks that are available, particularly since news organizations find it more and more difficult to economically support a series of full-time bureaus around the world and full-time correspondents. So more and more they are going to have to depend on freelancers. So how they manage their brand, I think, is going to depend on their relationship with those freelancers, how they establish criteria. Well, I'm not much of an expert on the semantic web stuff, but I think that some way for people to authenticate who they are when they send a report, so that their reputation, they can establish their identity in a way that's verifiable, and their reputation. Is this someone who's done 100 reports that have proved to be accurate, or is this someone who's made things up in the past? I think one of the things that the web can provide in the future that it doesn't provide now is more of a guarantee of the identity of someone, and given that identity, some kind of verification of their reputation. Because that, after all, that's what when we're talking about brand, another word for that is reputation.
What is your best or your best advice to people that is working in social media or in marketing and social media that is beginning an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the most obvious thing to me, that I don't think is obvious to everyone, is that you can't really be an expert on social media unless you really do it yourself. So people need to spend their time communicating with other people. It's not just a broadcast of your content. It's establishing relationships and giving answers to people who have questions. It has a lot to do with having a lot of conversations with people. Back to this maintaining networks, I think you can have a large network, but that network's not worth a lot unless that network has some trust in you. And I don't think that people in networks will trust an individual unless they've had some communication with them, with some conversation with them, and whether they've provided information for them in the past. So I think you need to experiment, and you need to spend some time giving information to others and establishing conversations with others before you can really use social media for marketing or for
in a good way,
journalism.
not in bad sense, right? Information
Yes.
in a good way, not criticizing everything, or
Well, I think
which is better.
well, marketing has always in the past had to do with companies really controlling their message. So they use public relations, they use advertising, they craft messages, they broadcast these messages. It hasn't had anything to do really until recently with listening to customers. So when you're talking about a commercial enterprise and doing its marketing using social media, that has a lot more to do with listening. And that means that you're going to be hearing some criticism. So most of the traditional marketing professionals are used to broadcasting a message. They're not used to listening to criticism. And I think that listening to messages which may convey negative opinions about your product is something that people need to do, and that companies need to do if they really want to establish a conversation. Because I think rather than just getting their brand known, and I don't think that that's ever going to go away, traditional advertising and public relations will continue to exist, but having a conversation with your customers really requires you to be able to listen to them and listen to them when they have negative things to say about your product.
Okay, thank you very much.